welcome to the Inner Conscious. I am your host, Reverend Harvey L. Bailey, and happy holidays to everyone. It is December 24th, 2015, and today we are going to talk about the man who was born to a virgin on December 25th. And my host for that conversation, my guest, should I say, for that conversation, will be Rev Arlene Kahet. But before we get into that, let's listen to this short excerpt from Neale Donald Walsch's New York Times bestseller, Conversations with God.
There's so much I want to ask. There's so many questions. Suppose I should start with the big ones, the obvious ones. Like, why is the world in the shape it's in?
Of all the questions man is asked of God, this is the one asked most often. From the beginning of time, man has asked it. From the first moment to this, you have wanted to know, why must it be like this? The classic posing of the question is usually something like, if God is all perfect and all loving, why would God create pestilence and famine, war and disease, earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes, and all manner of natural disaster, deep personal disappointment and worldwide calamity? The answer to this question lies in the deeper mystery of the universe and the highest meaning of life. I do not show my goodness by creating only what you call perfection all around you. I do not demonstrate my love by not allowing you to demonstrate yours. As I've already explained, you cannot demonstrate love until you can demonstrate not loving. A thing cannot exist without its opposite, except in the world of the absolute. Yet the realm of the absolute was not sufficient for either you or me. I existed there in the always, and is from where you too have come. In the absolute, there is no experience, only knowing. Knowing is a divine state, yet the grandest joy is in being. Being is achieved only after experience. The evolution is this: knowing, experiencing, being. This is the Holy Trinity, the triune that is God. God the Father is knowing, the parent of all understandings, the begetter of all experience, for you cannot experience that which you do not know. God the Son is experiencing, the embodiment, the acting out of all that the Father knows of itself, for you cannot be that which you have not experienced. God the Holy Spirit is being, the disembodiment of all that the Son has experienced of itself, the simple, exquisite isness possible only through the memory of the knowing and experiencing. This simple being is bliss. It is God's state after knowing and experiencing itself. It is that for which God yearned in the beginning.
All right. And so that was Ellen Bernstein as the voice of God talking with Neale Donald Walsch in Conversations with God. So I want to bring in right now my business partner for relationship coaching. You've also heard her on One Love, One Connection, One Us every second Thursday of the month with me, Reverend Arlene Kahet.
Hi. Happy holidays to you and everyone that's listening.
Hey, Arlene. Happy holidays to you. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year's. I hope I got everybody. I apologize if I missed anyone. How are you this evening?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I am excellent. So what do you think of that little excerpt from Neale Donald Walsch's book?
I think that that I am in agreement with the response that God gave in that particular conversation, which is that God gives us the opportunity, or the source of creation, as I prefer to call God. The source of creation gives us the opportunity to pick and choose our experiences. There are many different traditions that actually talk about that, and about how we, before the formation of this world, we were discontent with the experience of perfection.
Okay.
And so there were we as a collective decided that we wanted to work towards our perfection, to be able to express it, to experience the dark and the light, to experience, just to experience and to be of service. And that is the reason why we experience what we experience now. And the thing is that, and also get back to that understanding and having that experience of being separated from source, or having the seeming separation from source, because we're never separated. We're all
never
one.
Separated.
Yeah,
right.
We're never, but we're in our human experience, we have this idea of being separate from one another, when that is not the case at all.
So I want to ask you, you said discontent. Do you think that it was discontent? I didn't really get that. I don't feel in what God, in this case, because in the story, Conversations with God, throughout the book, or if you've heard the audio book from which that comes, the voice of God is both male and female, and it's for a very good reason. Because we have been in a male-dominated society for some 2,500 years, the God has always been portrayed as male. Yet very few people know and understand that before that, it was a female period where God was thought of as female, and many of the gods or goddesses were females. And we're going to talk about plural gods later, but I bring that up for this because, here we have a segment where the voice of God was a female, but just my opinion, don't feel that, there was discontent. Of course, she didn't say that, but it was a desire to know, so it's really a seeking more knowledge, not discontent with what you have, but wanting more. You're in a state of perfection. In the world of the absolute, which to, change those words and say in heaven, which more people will understand it that way than the world of the absolute, everything is perfect. We know ourselves as God. We understand that we are connected to God, that, God lives and breathes in us as us, and that there's no separation. And in order to know ourselves as other than God, to truly experience God, which is what I feel she was putting out there. She talked a bit about experiencing God. In order to experience God, you have to think that you're other than connected to God. And that's what, this realm, the 3D world, the realm of effects, as they call it, the world that we live in, allows us to do. It's more of an educational thing. Not that we need to learn, but to help us know ourselves again as God. It's like, I'll give you a really good analogy. When I first went to basic training, there were people who had came from small towns in the Midwest where they had never seen a black person other than TV and in the movies. And most didn't go to see movies, where black people were the stars. So basically on TV. And so there was this one guy in my unit who, in basic training, was just fascinated with the handful of us black guys. Me probably more than the other ones because the other ones were they were not nice. Let's put it that way. they were highly aggressive individuals, which was perfect because this was Fort Benning, this was infantry training. Highly aggressive individuals make good infantrymen. But anyway, for him it was just like wow, and so what little bit he knew about black people came from stereotypes, and so it's only when he got to experience black people to find out that, wow, they're not the way I heard or what I thought. So it's kind of like that. When you know yourself as God, when you're in the realm of the absolute, anything you think you can create. You want for nothing because you know that you are perfect, whole, and complete. So to move away from that, to forget that, and think of yourselves, as many of us think of ourselves now, as separate from God, and that God is, up in the heavens and we're down here, not knowing that we're still connected, and you'll always be connected. It's impossible for you not to be one with God. Absolutely impossible. But it gives you the opportunity to now work your way back towards knowing yourself as God. And so I say that to say, back to what I was asking you, do you think it was a discontent? I didn't really get that.
Well, perhaps the word discontent wasn't the appropriate phrase to use. However, when she mentions when God mentions that the experience was not good for, and I'm paraphrasing, but not good for either one of us, you and me. I would say that the desire to have contrast,
yes,
was there.
Yes,
and
yes,
that I've often heard it said that our experience, our human experience, is necessary so that God can know God's self better.
Yeah. And I am one of those people who definitely believe in that there's nothing here to learn. It's only to remember that we are one with God and we're capable of creating everything, anything, whatever. It's all within us. It's just that we have to know ourselves as such. And so like when Neale asked in the beginning, why is the world in the shape that the world is in? Now, this was in 1992, when he first started writing this book. Here it is, 2015, and the shape of the world for most people would seem to be far worse now than it was back then. Yet the question is still out there for a lot of people seeking, spiritual assistance. Why is the world in the shape that the world is in? And the answer still remains the same. How can you know yourself as God if you don't know the opposite? Everything is about contrast. It's like you kiss a girl and you ask her, did you like that? And she said, I don't know. I have nothing to compare it to. How can she know if you're a good kisser if she hasn't been kissed by someone else? You only know what you know until you know opposite. Then you have the choice. You have the chance to make a choice, to decide which you like better and what you don't like. So I think that's very interesting, and I think that, that's important for us to remember as we go throughout what we're going to talk about tonight. And so when we come back, Arlene, from this commercial, we're going to start talking about the different religions.
All righty.
Are you ready for that?
I'm ready. You ready?
Oh, I am ready.
All right.
I am braced and excited about it. All right. And so we're back. Okay, so Arlene.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
You with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
You there laughing. What in the world is going on?
Oh, no, I just heard my cell phone go off, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, he's playing the commercial. He's playing the commercial, and I'm ringing my bell in here.
Well, don't be ringing your bell on the line. You do that in private. we need to save talk like that for the relationship show, not for the inner consciousness. So, anyway, I want to first mention, as we get into talking about religions, that there are an estimated 4,200 different religions in the world today. And that's an estimate. It's not an exact number. So it could be higher or it could be lower. But it's roughly 4,200 recognized religions in the world today. And, of course, there are those that we are more popular with. Like what? What do we have, Arlene?
Well, Christianity, especially over here in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the Muslim. Then we have Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
There are, other different religions as well. Those are the top three that I could think of. Those are the top three that I can think of. But you of course can bring up more.
Mm-hmm. And so that we don't offend our Muslim friends, Islam would be the actual religion.
Okay,
it's okay. I just don't want to, ruffle anybody's feathers.
My apologies.
This is a sensitive subject for a lot of people, but yeah. And Judaism,
mm-hmm.
Baha'i faith, Hinduism, Taoism, Sikhism.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many more out there, even to include Wicca, which is a recognized religion. Did you know that?
Yes, I was aware of that too.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so there are so many out there, with there being an estimated or a recognized 4,200 different religions. But, Arlene, do you know what the oldest religion is?
No, but I believe that you're going to tell me.
Well, since you put it that way, I guess I should tell you. Yeah, okay. Hinduism is considered the oldest religion in the world. However, here's what's interesting about it, because religious scholars go back and forth on, is Hinduism really the oldest religion? Well, if we go on the face of it, yes, Hinduism is the oldest religion. It predates Christianity by hundreds of years, or thousands, should I say, of years. But Hinduism, as it was originally practiced, is not practiced that way in today's world, which is why religious scholars differ on it. Some says yes, and some say, well, it's not essentially the same practice today. Even the gods that we know of today in Hindu, Brahma, Shiva, and help me out. Vishnu.
Let's see.
Well, those three are like the primary three, and Ganesh, but those three are like the primary three, right? Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva.
Shiva, Shakti. Mm-hmm.
They were not really the major gods of the original practice of Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
So it was much later, around the 5th century before Christian era, that they came to be the way they are today. But is it still the same religion? Maybe, maybe not. It just carries the same name for some. For others, it doesn't matter. But that is considered the oldest religion. Do you know which religion has the most people or the most members?
I believe it's Islam, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, Islam is actually number 2.
number 2.
Christianity claims 1/3 of the world's population, making it the largest of all the religions. Christianity, though, has roughly 26,000 different groups of Christianity. And so we may be more familiar with, your Protestants, like your Baptists, Lutheran, wow, I come to a blank there. Methodists, Episcopalians, and some of those. And, of course, your Catholics being the largest single group of Christians. But there are 26,000 different Christian groups. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That is amazing, isn't it?
No, it's not amazing.
You're not amazed by it at all?
I'm not amazed by it at all. I'm not amazed by it at all. And the reason being is that, one of the things is that, a person's spiritual walk is really a personal and private thing.
Yes.
And the thing is that what happened, my belief is what happened is there were some people that put down an edict that you need to do it this way, and they were like, well, I don't think I need to do it this way. I'm going to break off and do my own thing. And so as a result of people breaking off and doing their own thing, you have, this multiplicity of a person's divine walk being expressed in all of these religions. So, no, I don't find that impressive. I just find it interesting. I do find
Well, and I guess you're right, because it probably is more interesting than impressive. I liken it to martial arts. If you study martial arts, or you know someone who studied martial arts and they've studied the history, you find someone who studied a martial art and they found it to be too rigid. So then they create their own martial arts, i.e. Bruce Lee, studied Wing Chun primarily, but other forms of martial arts, and created Jeet Kune Do. Why? Because the other ones just had, weaknesses for him that he figured he could cover and make better by creating his own version. So you're right. And there's so many different martial arts, from Japan, from Korea, China, Okinawa, where karate is said to have begun. So I guess, if I liken it to that, you're right. It's not so much impressive as it is interesting, because the truth of the matter is, just like you said, everyone has their own spiritual walk. 7 billion people on the planet, and it's, I guess, kind of crazy to think that we would all fall in line to accept and believe one thing. So we need, we'll take some of this. It's like sitting at the table, at Christmas time or Thanksgiving, and you've got some gravy, you've got some ham, some turkey, some chicken, and you got some mashed potatoes, and you've got some stuffing and cranberry sauce, and then there's some corn, and, maybe some seafood on the table. It's all this different kind of foods. And so what you're doing is like, well, I'll have some of this, and I'll have some of this. This whole feast is what you're offering me as one belief, but I don't want all of this. I don't like cranberry sauce. They make me break out. So I'm not going to have cranberry sauce. I like gravy, but you've got beef gravy, and I want chicken gravy, and for some reason you don't have chicken gravy here. So I'm not going to have this. I'm going to create my own. I'm going to make some chicken gravy. So, I guess it's like that. It's like coming to a spiritual buffet, and Christianity with 26,000 different groups offer you something for everyone. But what about some of the smaller religions out there, some of the little-known religions? Have you heard of Sikhs and Sikhism?
Yes, I've heard of Sikhism.
I first came across Sikhism a few years back. I think it was around 2010 or 2009. I was in D.C. with my family. I took my son and my daughter and, my daughter's mother and her son. We all went down to do a day in D.C. We hit all the, tourist attractions. But as we were crossing one major street, there was a parade coming through, and it was a Sikh parade, and they were bringing attention to the Sikh religion, and they handed out little cards. It's a little wallet card, and it tells you about what Sikhs believe. On the back, it tells you where they come from, and there's like a number of how to get in touch with the organization. And, to me, as I looked at them before I got the card and found out what they were about and who they were, I assumed they were Muslims. I assumed it was an Islamic thing based upon how they looked and how they dressed. How about that? I just automatically typed them based on what I seen.
Mhm.
And that's never a good thing, but thank goodness, there were people in that group as they walked by that was handing out these cards and educating people. Well, not a whole lot because they didn't stand around and talk to you. They may spend a couple minutes if you ask them a question, but basically they were giving you the cards to let you know who they were and what they do. And, it says on the card that they are the 5th largest religion. I was like, wow. Never even heard of them before today, and yet they are the 5th largest religion.
Mhm.
Wow. Right. So what about some other religions that you can think of, Arlene?
Well, I can think of the Sufis.
Okay.
Aren't they the ones that do the whirling dervishing thing?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe so.
Yes. And I was watching a few last month, actually, I believe, or month before last month, Belief that Oprah had on, she did a show every day on different people's beliefs, and the name of them escapes me, but there's this one particular religion where there was this young girl. She had been in the military, and she decided to become a monk amongst her sect, whatever religion she was from.
Okay.
And one of the things that they would do is that she, before she would go off to be a monk, they would have her spend time around her family, and the family would spend time trying to convince her not to seek out her spiritual path, because the seeking out her spiritual path meant that she was renouncing her, renouncing the family, and she would be living amongst the monks, and amongst her people, she would be considered like a walking, living God. It was really, really interesting, and if she were to actually fall short of, after all of her processes of going through her experience, if she were to go back, then she would be ostracized and kicked out by her people. Well, she went ahead with it, and one of the last things that she did was pull out almost each strand of her hair as a renunciation of living as a regular person, and to be considered amongst her people to be a walking, living God. And then her family, it was by far the strangest thing that I had ever seen, at least from my perspective, because I've never seen that before. But, she takes that off all of her hair. Her family says, that, I no longer have a daughter anymore. and she lived as a monk, and these monks live such a aesthetic lifestyle that even at times they will go naked without any clothing on, walking their spiritual path and doing their spiritual practice. Again, I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for not having the name of that particular religion, but let's just put it this way, it was not any of the ones that we've mentioned so far. It did go by a different name, but it's...
And chances are we won't mention it with there being 4,200 different religions. And for most religions, monks is a male-dominated field. Women would become nuns. So we're probably not going to touch on it, or I may, because I have a list of names that I'm going to mention of different religious groups, and maybe I get lucky and touch on a name, and you might say, hey, that sounds like it. But, it definitely sounds like one of the more obscure religions, even in that, and I think that's a good thing, because, again, here we're hearing about monks, and monks is traditionally in most major religions a male-dominant field. A monk is a man, and so here you have a woman who's living amongst monks, and you can hear the discipline that they can walk around naked, and there's no excitement there. It is what it is. We are all one, and that's one of the things that you and I, we kind of discuss in our relationship talk, but it's important for people to understand that when we have this battle of male versus female, the only battle you're really fighting is the battle within yourself. Every human being has male and female energies, i.e., and I said this earlier, that it's very important, the fact that Neale Donald Walsch used male and female voice for God, because God is not physical human being. God is an energy, and God has both male and female energy, as does all things that God has created. Human beings, we have male and female energy, and when we have seen a male-dominated, period, as we have throughout the 20th century and many centuries before it, you have the male playing up his male strength and making the female strength seem less than by comparison. Again, experienced by comparison, yet they're both equal. And so in that, we've seen how man has basically torn the world apart. Just today I was seeing that there's this big garbage pile surrounding the earth. Not only do we pollute the earth, we've now found a way to pollute outside the earth so bad that NASA has to monitor it, because it's hard to send stuff up into space because the earth is surrounded by a garbage pit. And so man, in his infinite wisdom, has seen fit to destroy things and me man, me destroy and then build. No, you destroy. You create, not necessarily build. You create and you destroy. Yet now we're moving into a more of a female-dominated time, and so women are asserting themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of female assertion in the new feminist movement is not to be equal to man, but to be better than man by outmanning man, which still isn't helping, because now women are trying to be more like men, only better, and doing the same male things instead of appealing to the strength of female things. But the bottom line is we're all equal, and every one of us have a part to play, which creates balance in the universe, and you can get more things done when you work together than when you work apart. Mm-hmm. And any group knows that.
Yes. Very true. Very true. Very true.
But I wanted to just go through just a list of the many different religions that I found. Babism. You ever heard of that? No. Me neither. The Baha'i faith, Christianity. And I'm not going to go through all of these different groups of Christianity, but I will name a few of them that you may have heard of. Seventh-day Adventists.
Yes.
Anglicanism.
Yes.
Baptist.
Yes.
Calvinism.
Yes.
Christian Science.
Yes.
I knew you would know that one. Jehovah's Witness.
Yes.
Lutheran.
Mhm.
Methodist.
Yes.
Pentecost.
Yes.
Roman Catholic.
Yes.
And Unitarian.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not going to go through any of the others. I just wanted to go through some of those.
Okay.
Gnosticism.
Yes.
And did you know there were a couple different groups of Gnostics?
Yes. And that's probably a discussion for another day, but the Essenes are considered like one of the Gnostic, a part of the Gnostic tradition.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
So yes, I was. I'm aware that I didn't realize that there was more than one.
Yeah, there's more than one. I think the Essenes, because of Jesus, is the most familiar. You know, the Essenes Gospels speak a lot of Jesus and how Jesus worked with the Gnostics.
Mhm.
That, thanks to, Nag Hammadi finding the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're familiar with that. But there are also groups called Sardonians, Simonians, Catharisms, and I think the Essenes actually fall under the Cathars.
Okay.
But there are a few others. I just wanted to give those. And then there is an offset of the Gnostic influence, the Kurdish religion, and we've heard a lot about Kurds in the news, but they have one called Yazidis. And then there's Persian Gnosticism, which I won't go into their different sects. There is the Syrian Egyptic Gnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
There is the neo-Gnostic groups, Islam, Khayyam. This one I won't even try to pronounce. It's Kharijite.
Okay.
Sufism, which you had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And Sufism actually falls under different groups of Islam, as does the Sunnis.
Okay.
The Black Muslims, we're familiar with them.
Yes.
And under the Black Muslims, you have the American Society of Muslims. We have the 5% Nation we've heard about. The Moorish Orthodox Church, we've heard about them. The Moorish Science Temple, the Nation of Islam, just to name a few. Judaism.
Okay.
And then there's the Black Hebrew Israelites, the Rastafarians,
Yes.
the Mandeans and Sabians, Shabakism, then some Indian religions like Ayavasa, Bhakti, Buddhism. Most people think of Buddhism as being Chinese and Japanese, but as you and I know, Gautama, the Buddha, came from India. Hinduism, Jainism.
That's what she followed. Thank
you. Yeah, see, I said maybe I'll name it. I guess we got lucky here. Maivazi, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism.
I've heard of it. I don't know the details about it.
Zoroastrianism goes back. It is one of the ancient religions. It is questionably as old, if not older, than Hinduism. Zoroastrian was the earliest religions of the Persians. And they believed in, well, I'll come back to that when we start talking about the gods. But, yeah, so that's an old one as well. They're a small group today compared to what they once were. Confucianism.
Heard of that?
Shinto, Taoism, and Yoruba. You've heard of that.
Yes.
And okay, so I'm going to stop there. There's a whole lot more, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there because this list seems to go on forever and ever and ever.
Ever.
But
and
my
ever,
guess
ever.
is it probably
Ever.
comes forever, ever, and ever, ever, and ever. But it probably comes pretty close to all 4,200. If not, it probably comes pretty close to it. So that is a lot, an awful lot of religions, and for the most part, most people don't realize or even think that there are that many people out there who differ from the major religion. Again, Christianity is 1/3 of the 7 billion people on the planet. And so if you think of that and you don't realize that, Christianity itself has 26,000 different groups, but in addition to its own 26,000 different groups, there is still 4,200 or 4,199 other groups out there. So that's awful lot of different people who are seeking God in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, what are some of the gods that are out there? What are some of the deities that you're familiar with from the various religions?
Well, you've already talked about some of the Hindu gods, and what is it? There are, and understand that that many of the Wiccan tradition do hold or give offerings to the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods, Apollo, let's see, Jupiter, some of the Egyptian. And understand that there are also many. What has happened in many traditions is that when a particular group gets a hold of the information, they rename them, but it's still pretty much the same energy. Like for instance, ISIS, and if you hear the name ISIS, if you also hear the name Aset, those are that particular energy, that particular God is one and the same. Let's see. I do have it written down here. Actus, Bacchus, Dionysus, Helos, Horus, Mithras, Nimrod.
Hey, did you just call me a Nimrod? Let's not be offensive here, calling me names. Come on.
Very funny. Very, very funny. Ra. I'm not going to even try.
Ta, Ptha-H.
Thoth. Thoth. And Thoth is the Greek name for is the Greek name, but the other name is Tahuti.
Oh, T-O-T-H, Thoth.
Yeah, Thoth. And then what is it? And then we get into. I only know like a handful or only a few of the Norse gods.
Thor,
yeah, my favorite.
Loki,
and the Allfather, right now his name is escaping me. But there are many of them, and which I don't really have the names of right at the moment.
That's okay. We really just, this is an attempt to introduce people to the idea that there are other religions out there. And as you mentioned, and a lot of people have heard and may not even have realized that Isis, Horus, Heru, Osir, Aset, Osiris, these are names of gods. Now, of course, Isis is Aset, and Osiris is Osir, and Horus is Heru. But so I just doubled them up. But
and
a lot of
and I think Hermes is another name for Thoth as well. So yeah.
And so, we've heard these names as they become more and more popular in our world, but we don't realize who they really were, that these were actual, names used for God. Thor, Zeus, Mercury, Apollo, and I'm not talking Creed.
Yes.
There were so many. Of course, we are all familiar with Jesus, and we're familiar with Allah. But how many of us? And we're familiar with Buddha. But what about Hari of the Sikh religion? Hashem of Judaism. And as you and I were talking earlier about the Zoroastrians, how about Ahura Mazda, the god of Zoroastrianism? In Confucianism, wow, that didn't come out smoothly. There is Shang Dai, Lord on high, and Shang Dai lives in Taiyin, which is heaven.
There's Kuan Yin. And then, and ladies and gentlemen, we've only, we haven't even gotten to, touched the tip of the iceberg.
Not even.
Yeah, not even, because different, over here in North America, the Native Americans had their own gods as well. And, I mean, we could really spend a whole 2 hours just listing off the names of them.
And what's interesting is religion basically depends upon where you came from. Now it's not that way as much as it used to be, because again, with Christianity being 1/3 of the world's population, you can find Christians almost anywhere. But still, for the most part, if you were born in the Middle East, you're more likely to be a Muslim than you are to be a Christian. If you are born of the Native American faith and raised primarily around Native Americans, not mixed so much with, the rest of America, then you will probably hold on to the Native American faith. And even those who do, I have a friend, and, they have their powwows and their ceremonies, so they still pay reverence to their gods. And so depend upon where you grow up and who raised you and what their belief was will strongly play a part in what your belief is. And even as we reach adult age and we can change our minds and make our own decisions, very few people actually stray too far away from what they grew up in. But Arlene, here's an interesting fact that I found, of course, as I did my research for this show. Did you know? Dun, dun, dun. And it's interesting because you spoke a lot of Thoth. The being, the energy that was Thoth was known by lots of names over lots of years. One of them was the pharaoh Akhenaten. Akhenaten is credited with creating the belief in one God, which is monotheism. which is what we have today, primarily around the world, monotheism.
Mm-hmm.
What I found out today and doing my research for this show is that prior to Akhenaten's monotheism, you did not have so much, what's the word I'm looking for? And we're going to do, a little later, we're going to talk about religious intolerance, but for lack of a better term, you did not have the intolerance between the different religions before there was monotheism. So before Akhenaten, when you could walk down the towns, you could walk through the towns, and this person is worshiping this god, and this person is worshiping this god, and they all had their own god who they chose to worship for whatever reason. There was no great battle. Not to say that you didn't have, because you did have, but you didn't have it on a scale as what we've seen, over the past 400 years with like the Crusades. You didn't have it that way where one religion was trying to wipe out all other religions, or even like today with ISIS. You didn't have that. You may have had this group saying, my God is greater than your God. You believe in Zeus, well, I believe in Ahura Mazda, and so on. So you may have had small sects that claim that, but rarely did they come to war and try to wipe out the other group for believing in something different. After monotheism, after Akhenaten created monotheism, the belief in one God, then you have, the one path to the Almighty. Now, I don't knock anyone. If you believe there's one path, I just feel there's 7 billion people on Earth, and there isn't one way of doing anything. How can there be one way of getting to God?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With all the books, you have the Holy Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Kabbalah, the Book of the Dead. What else? Help me out, Arlene. Throw some books in there.
The Quran.
The Torah, the Talmud.
Yes. You know what? You've said the ones that I do know.
I stole yours.
Yeah.
Shame on me. That was me smacking my hand. Not with a ruler. but and I just wanted to mention that as we went through, some of these deities, that at one time the more popular belief was in multiple deities. And even with that said, I want to say this because it's important for people who hear that as heresy to understand there's only one God. There's only one God. But God can show up many different ways. Mm-hmm. God can be in all places at once. Mm-hmm. So God can show up to me as Zeus, and to you as Allah, and to my friends in Korea as Buddha, and so on, and yet be the same God. Mm-hmm. There's only one God. Maybe multiple paths, but only one God. And so that takes me back to thinking about what you said when you said you didn't think it was impressive, but interesting that there were, an estimated 26,000 different groups in Christianity. It's something for everyone.
Yeah, there's something for everyone, and one of the things that I always say to people, because I've been asked that question a lot of times about when people come to you. Somebody asks me, well, what do you say to that person that comes to you and says something contrary? I'm like, well, I don't tend to get into an argument about that. However, if you look at the way that nature is, you look at the way the world is, you just look at the world around you and see how God is expressing itself. Every snowflake, every leaf on the tree, every drop of water, every person is an expression, a divine expression of the source of creation. So when you look at the multiplicity that's around you, and that you actually acknowledge that you are expressing Source's divineness in the world, then it is hard to believe that the Source that created all of that and not have one single person, single individual, single leaf, single snowflake be exactly the same. How can you expect everybody's spiritual walk to be the same?
Absolutely.
It makes absolutely no sense. And if so don't get yourself all like bent out of shape. And if somebody is not doing it the way that you would want them to do it, or don't get bent out of shape when somebody gets upset with you, you just tell them, you know what, I can accept and appreciate where you are and how you're expressing in the world, and I'm going to keep doing my thing as well.
All right, and Arlene, we've got a caller on the line who would like to add to the conversation.
All right.
Okay. Hello, caller, you're on the line, area code 612, last part 3103.
Yes, good evening, guys. Merry Christmas. How you guys doing?
Good evening and Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays.
Who do we have on the line with us?
Hi, sir. Yes, my name is Michael. I'm calling from Minnesota.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I think both of you brought up some interesting ideas, and I think there's some misconceptions about history when it comes to the studies of religion. You brought up Akhenaten from Egypt and the whole monotheistic view with him. Monotheism is actually more ancient than that. It goes back to the Chinese culture where they worshiped a god named Shangdi. And we're talking about, this basically predates the Egyptian culture. And when the Chinese worship this god, the descriptions of him are almost identical to the descriptions that we see of God in the Old Testament. In fact, they had no idol. All they had was a large altar in a temple next to the imperial city, where every year the emperor would go and make do a sacrifice on behalf of the people and their sins. It was almost to a T identical to what we see with the whole temple system we see in the Old Testament. And many of the psalms and worship songs and hymns that they had are nearly identical verbatim to many of the psalms you read in the Bible, for example.
Wow.
And and what's even more incredible is when you study the Chinese language, the characters for in ancient Chinese language, many of them are actually depictions of a lot of the biblical accounts we see in Genesis. For example, this has actually been well documented by, you can look this up, Chinese letters that basically describe most of the first few chapters of Genesis, when it talks about words like a boat, words like garden, words like man. All these things are depictions of scenarios we see in Genesis chapters 1 through 3. And this has been well documented, so I recommend anyone to look into this. It's incredible to see. And that so the Chinese worshiped this one god all the way up until about the 4th century BC, where Buddhism was introduced. But prior to that, for more than 1,000 years, they worshipped this one invisible god. And so this idea that polytheism predates monotheism and that monotheism is a later sort of idea, I think is somewhat of a misconception. And I'll just add one more point too about, you guys talked about it not making sense that there's only one path to God. And I think when people hear that, it does two things. Firstly, it says that all the religions are basically teaching the same thing. But when you study each religion in depth, there are major contradictions between them. I'll give you an example. The Hindus believe in a caste system. And in the caste system, people are born in certain levels in society, and they have to stay at that level for life. For example, there's a class called the untouchables, and these people are forced to basically oftentimes live in where there's a lot of trash, and they're forced to do menial jobs like janitors and they're forced to stay at the bottom of society. And this belief system is in complete contradiction to, let's say, what Jesus taught when he said Don't be like the pagans who like to lord over one another, but rather, the kingdom of God is he who wants to be great must become the servant of all people. And so we see a complete contrast in the way they approach people, how they value people, how they approach things. I mean, Jesus Christ taught the whole, love your neighbor as you love yourself, to serve other people, to dedicate your life to helping the poor and loving your enemies. In contrast, in Islam, you have them teaching that to kill all the infidels in the name of Allah. And it clearly advocates for this. In fact, they're rewarded for it. So, and you brought up the Crusades. And again, it's like when people say that to me, I always question how much history have they studied, because the Crusades happened between the 10 and 1200s. And why is that date relevant? A lot of people aren't aware of this, that the Bible was not translated into the common languages of the people, like English, French, and German, until the 1500s. The Catholic Church banned it up until then. They only allowed it to be printed in Latin, which the vast majority of people in Europe had no idea. The only people who could read it were the clergy. And they did that on purpose to exploit the people. And that's why we see in the 1500s, when men who could understand the Hebrew and Greek and were translating it into English, French, and German and distributing it to the people, the Catholic Church was hunting these men down and killing them and burning them at the stake. And they banned anyone from reading the Bible in their own language. In England, it got to the point where even children were being imprisoned for being able to recite the Lord's Prayer in English. And so when the Crusades happened, the vast majority of people in Europe were completely ignorant to anything the Bible said. So the Pope gets up and makes a declaration and says to them that anyone who goes to the Holy Land and fights the Muslims will have all their sins forgiven and be given a ticket to heaven. Now, these Christians who he's talking to, they have nothing to look to test what he's saying. They have to take his word for it. And so that's why all these people volunteered. Now, if I did the same thing today, if I went to every church in America and every church around the world and I said to them, if you come with me and if we go to the Middle East and fight the Muslims, God will forgive all your sins and you'll be given a ticket to heaven, not one Christian would follow me, because they could all look to the Bible, see for themselves what it says, and know that there's no such thing. That's not how your sins are forgiven. So I think whenever we bring up these things, you have to, in every aspect in life, study everything. My professor in school taught me, beware the sound of one hand clapping. You should always look at both sides and study both arguments in depth. And that's why Jesus said, when you know the truth will set you free. And the last point I'll make is the reason that there's one path, and I'm speaking about Jesus here, the reason he said he's the only path to God. A lot of people understand this has to all do with justice. This is why Jesus made that statement. And the reason he made that statement is every other religious system, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Hindus, Buddhists, all of them, Sikhs, I can go through the list, they all believe in this concept that if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, somehow that'll allow God to allow you into paradise. Like in Islam, for example, there's a scale, and your good and bad deeds are weighed on a scale. And if your good outweighs your bad, you'll be led into heaven. Now, in Islam, they even have an interesting caveat where they say that each of your good deeds count for 10 and your bad deeds count for 1, which is just an interesting that they even throw that little caveat in there. Now, the reason that, logically speaking, we know that that can't be true and that doesn't make any sense is that if any one of you and I, let's say we violate the law of the land here and we get brought to a courtroom, justice never cares about what else you've done. All justice focuses on is the violation of the law at hand. So if I broke a law, like if I stole, and I come before a judge and I say to the judge, sir, what I did was wrong and I shouldn't have stolen, but look at all these other good things I've done. Look at how many homeless people I've fed. Look at how many charities I've donated to. Look at all these different projects I've taken apart. Now, the judge may commend me and say, well, that's good that you did those things, but that doesn't excuse the fact that you committed a crime. And justice demands that you have to be punished for that crime you committed, irregardless of everything else you've done. So when we come to the Bible says God, who's the ultimate judge, is the ultimate upholder of justice, has that same dilemma. Because you and I, each one of us, we've all violated his law. We've all lied. We've all stolen. We've taken his name in vain. We've all had sex out of marriage or at least lusted in our hearts. And so all of us have violated his law in some way. We're all guilty. So God has this dilemma. On one end, he's a God of justice, so he has to punish evil. On the other side, God loves us and wants to forgive us. The problem is you can't do justice and mercy at the same time. They contradict each other. You either do one or the other. You cannot do both. So the solution that the Bible says is that God sent his son Jesus to die on the cross to pay the penalty for our sins, to meet the requirement of justice, and so doing so, offering you forgiveness and mercy, therefore doing these two things at the exact same time. And that's why Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man can come to the Father except through me. Because unless your sins are paid for, you're going to have to face justice. And God will give each man what he deserves. And if you think that you're good enough on your own account to pass the judgment of God, good luck with that. You're deceiving yourself. Because God's law is a mirror for you and I to look to realize how we stand in God's sight. And the biggest deception in our society is people think that they're good because they judge each other by comparing themselves to one another. But we're supposed to compare ourselves to God's law, and God's law is based on the principle of doing to others as you want done to you. So if you've never lied, if you've never stolen, if you've never dishonored your parents, taken the Lord's name in vain, committed adultery, committed murder, if you've never done any of these things, then you might be able to pass the judgment. But if you're honest with yourself and you know that you've done it, you've violated all these laws, then the reality is you have a guilty sentence hanging over your head. Now, you can go the way of the other religions and try to play that con game where you're going to bribe the judge and think that you can do these X number of good things and this is going to discount the evil that you've done. You can try that. But at the end of the day, any honest person knows that you're not going to pass that because that will never work in the court of law among men. How do you think that's going to work in the court of heaven and with the ultimate judge who sees everything you've ever done, every detail, every aspect? Nothing's hidden. There's no lawyer. All the evidence is laid out. So that's the truth. And I'm sorry that people have been misled by all this nonsense, all these rudimentary philosophies of men who all they do is come up with this nonsense to justify themselves before as if they're not evil. And I'm tired of hearing this, man. It's 2015. How do we not understand these things now? If you don't get this now, how in the world are you ever going to be right with God?
Okay. And, Michael, we definitely appreciate your comments. Arlene, anything you'd like to say?
No. I honor and appreciate his thoughts and his opinions, and thank you so much for sharing with us today.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you for tuning in.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. You guys have a good night.
You do the same. All right. And so, Arlene, let's go ahead and move into the evolution of religion. And we got a whole lot from Michael there. It's interesting that he mentioned Shang-Di, who, when I was going through Confucianism, I had mentioned that he was the god of that. So, that's some information that we did not know, did not have. Mm-hmm. All right. And so, religion, not spirituality, but religion has been man's attempt to explain the higher power, to explain God, to explain God's working in our world. So if we look back over time and we make an attempt, if you will, to put it in some kind of historical standpoint as to where religion began, and this is just you and I, it's just us, trying to put some things together. Obviously, early man had noticed some phenomenons and wanted to make some sense of them. And so it's probably safe to say that earthborn religions or nature religions would have probably been the first evolution.
No, most definitely, just from the process of observing the environment itself, yes. And also, I'm of the opinion that chances are that because of the very nature of those particular, their, observing nature and observing what was going on, that they were also having some experiences that helped them to realize that they themselves were a part of nature and did not necessarily see themselves as separate. and just through their observations of nature, noticed that certain patterns were showing up.
Yeah. Okay. And so then we have around the 34th century before Christian era, BCE. That is around the time that the Hinduism, the earliest of the Hindu faith, started. And so if we go from that period on, and of course Hinduism, as I mentioned earlier, has gone through some changes over the centuries. It has changed. But that would be one of the earliest recognized religions, Hinduism. And then if we get into around the 12th century BCE, before Christian era, we have Krishna coming up, and then we have like Jainism being created. And after that, if we go a little further down, let's see, what do we have next coming up? The Judeo-Christian and later Islam after that. And so let's keep coming on down. We would then have Buddhism around 563 BC. We have Buddha. 551 Confucius with Confucianism. 440 BC Zoroastrianism. In 150 BC, the Hebrew Bible. Let's see. Christianity in the early hundreds AD. Let's see. That seems to be kind of about it. Michael mentioned the Crusades. I had mentioned it earlier, and then he went into talking about the Crusades. The first Crusade from 1095 to 1099 A.D. The second Crusade from 1147 to 1149. That one is also A.D. The third Crusade, 1199 to 1204. That's the fourth Crusade. The fifth Crusade was 1217 to 1221. The sixth Crusade, 1228 to 1229. The seventh Crusade, 1244. The eighth Crusade was in 1270. Then, a year later, 1271 to 1272 was the Ninth Crusade. Then, in 1320, we had the witch hunts, persecution for witchcraft, which we know today known as Wicca. In 1469 to 1539, we have Guru Nanak, who became the founder of Sikhism, that was birth to death. So Sikhism was founded during that time. In the 1500s, the African religious system was introduced into America, primarily through the slave trades. Also in the 1500s, Martin Luther did the Protestant Reformation. One of the things that Michael had mentioned was that, common people could not read the Bible. It was dictated to them. Martin Luther was instrumental in making that change so that the Bible was able to be read by everyone. In 1830, the Latter-day Saints movement took effect. 1817 to 1892 became the birth of the founder, or the birth and life of the founder of Baha'i faith. In 1879, Christian Science. In the 1930s, we have the Rastafarian movement. In 1952, Scientology was created. In the 60s, you had the neo-pagan and the New Age movement starting to gain some ground. In 1961, the Unitarian Church was created. And so, Arlene, on up to the day, that kind of covers most of the evolution of religion.
All righty.
Yeah, which brings us up to what we have today. And, of course, in talking about what we have today, we can look at religious intolerance of what we've seen over the past 100 years. Mm-hmm. And, Arlene, of course, when we talk religion, as we did with this show, everyone has strong opinions. Mm-hmm. But opinions are just that, opinions. Sometimes, and I learned this in my years in working in criminal justice, that you can have all the facts and still not have the truth. Mm-hmm. Because it's axiomatic. But when it comes to religion, there are little facts out there. It's mainly beliefs. Now, granted, we can look to various books, as we mentioned, but beyond that, if we're talking facts that would hold up in a court of law, since that was brought up, and even in a court of law, because as we know, and not that I wanted to get into it with Michael, but you can go to court and not be found guilty for a crime that you've clearly done. We see that on the news quite frequently. But to talk about being able to show some evidence, show some proof, when it comes to religion, it's safe to allow people to believe what they choose to believe, mm-hmm. and accept what you choose to believe. Your truth is your truth, and it's not necessarily going to be someone else's truth. Mm-hmm. And no matter how much you study, it's still not going to necessarily be someone else's truth, because they will study, and they can always find. It's like you can put two of the best lawyers in a courtroom, going back to the courtroom analogy, and for whatever one lawyer comes up with, the other lawyer can tear it down and say, yeah, but there's this and there's that and there's this and there's that, without having actually witnessed. And even when you witness something, which is very, very interesting, I go back to my years working as a private investigator in Texas, when I used to get witness statements for accidents for a lawyer. You can talk to several different people. Let's just say I'm getting a witness statement from people who saw someone get hit by a car, and I talk to 4 different people. I can get 4 different versions of what happened from 4 different people. 4 people saw the same thing, yet gave 4 different versions. Mm-hmm. Does this not happen?
Yes, it does happen. And I suppose from my perspective, here's one of the things that people may want to consider. I see it's a suggestion, but understand that religion in and of itself is man's explanation of the divine.
Right.
Has nothing to do with the reality of it, and that a person's spiritual walk is their spiritual walk, and what it, and it is probably, if you are exemplifying the very best expression of the nature of the divine, wouldn't it be better for you to be in a place of loving that person, loving those who do not share your same views, and be in a place of prayer for them, and not necessarily in a place of judgment? I only say this because people in and of themselves don't resist the idea of being judged. Otherwise, there wouldn't be over 4,000 religions on the planet.
And that's absolutely true. There's a reason why there's so many, because everybody is seeking what works for them without feeling judged.
Judged, yes, precisely. And it is, again, it is a suggestion. But with that being the case, ask yourself in your spiritual walk, what is it that you are representing? What is it that? How is it that? And if it is to follow exactly what the Bible, Bible says, then do that. Then do that, and be the best example of what those rules and edicts are suggesting, and be concerned about your own development and your own path, and so that your light shines so brightly that others will want to follow you. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, and that's very good. That is very good, because if you look at what happens, if we think about it from a purely humanistic standpoint, everyone wants to be right. And yes, people want to justify what they do. Does that make them right or wrong? Maybe it doesn't make them either right or wrong. It just makes them human. But when we're so wrapped up in our beliefs that we refuse to, you don't have to accept someone else's belief as yours, but allow them to have their belief. Then we become the most arrogant of arrogant, because it has to be what we believe or nothing at all. We are absolutely right. And again, that goes back to the numbers. 7 billion people on the planet, an estimated 2,400 different groups of Christianity, and they can't all agree on which way is the right way. There are 26,000 Christian groups and 4,200 different religions, and none of them really agree on what the right way is. When, in essence, the truth could be they're all the right way, whichever way works for this individual. Until we can actually start to accept that your way may be right for you but not right for me, then we can't have religious tolerance. And is that not one of the things that America was supposed to stand for? Coming to America so you don't suffer religious oppression? Yet we come here and still there's religious oppression. Right now, we have a political candidate who is spewing hate against a particular group. And if you listen to him and you think about it, we could go back to the beginnings of Nazi Germany and see how there was someone who spewed hate against a particular group and turned people against them. It's easy to manipulate people's emotions and feelings, especially when you start talking about things like beliefs, their belief systems. But I believe there is a God, and God's true religion is love. All else doesn't matter. God's true religion is love. Now, that's my belief. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not even going to try to make you agree with me. You can believe what you choose to believe. But we all must believe that there is something out there. Whether you're an atheist and you believe in a greater you, whether you're a Buddhist and you believe in Buddha, whether you're a Sikh and you believe in, what they believe in, or Christian and you believe in Jesus, whether you are whatever you choose to be and you believe in whatever you choose to believe in, ultimately somewhere in your book it talks about love. And how can you truly, truly, truly have love when you put yourself as opposition to someone else? There's no love in that. You don't have to. Love isn't about always agreeing. You can love someone and completely disagree with them. Love is about being kind. Love is about being tolerant. And when we have and have had for, the beginning of time, religious intolerance, because my God is better than your God. My God is bigger than your God. My God's been around here before your God. Mine is the only way. Yet you say the same thing. If we go by that belief, one of us is wrong. Or could it be that we're all right? Since we don't truly, truly know. And there are people who've had near-death experiences, and even in studying what they've said, they have different stories to tell when they come back. So what does that say?
That perhaps you get to write it the way you see it.
Maybe that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Maybe we truly are gods. Have I not said ye are also gods? I don't know. But what I do know is that we're going to take a little break, and I am going to play just a little something to, make us think about religious intolerance and make us think about why we can't get along with one another when it comes to religion. You know what they say, Arlene, there's two things that you never discuss in polite company. Mm-hmm. What are those two things?
Religion and politics. Mm-hmm.
Yes, religion and politics.
No no's.
And there's a very, very good reason for that, because friends can become enemies, and enemies can come to fisticuffs just because of it. Mm-hmm. Let's go to this song, and we'll be right back. All right. And Arlene, those were some strong words. That was a message that was literally shouted at people and can easily turn someone off.
Yes, it could easily turn somebody off.
Yet, one of the things that you and I know, and that we even discuss in our relationship workshops, is that what makes you upset is more about you than the other person. And so, again, before we let go of, let's talk about religious intolerance, it's important to understand, and of course it's only important if, you want to become more tolerant in a world where it looks like it's just turning topsy-turvy. It's about turning everybody against everybody. You can turn man against woman, black against white, light skin against dark skin. You can use every single tool to turn people against each other, Christian against Muslim, and so on and so on and so on. And you will never find unity if you keep finding reasons to differ. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, like you and I talk about in relationships, when there's a problem that you have with your partner, and to bring it to this, when there's a problem that you have hearing about or someone else's belief in something other than yours, that problem speaks more about you and how you're tied to what you believe. You know, masters, ascended masters of all faiths, talks about being able to transcend your emotions. Being able to transcend your emotions means that because I believe this and I say this doesn't mean that you have to believe this or you have to say this. I seek not to change you. I seek only to be a better me. And as you said earlier, live by example. Live your life so grand that other people see it and want to follow your path instead of trying to change people's path or judging people by their path. When we look at what's going on and when we look at what we've seen in the past, you know, people who were of a certain religion was carted off and exterminated. And most of the civilized world, for a while, was in agreement with it. Sat down and thought that this was okay before some action was finally taken. It wasn't like, you know, the civilized world was like, wow, we've got to stop this. This just can't happen. No. A lot of supporters all around the world thought it was okay. And so if you look at what's going on today, to say that displaced people should not come to a country filled with people whose ancestors were displaced. We no longer can allow you kind of people to come here or people who are displaced from your belief system to come here because we can't trust you. We don't know what you'll do. Look what we ourselves are doing right here within this own country. Look at your Los Angeles, your Chicagos, your Baltimore, your Philadelphias and Detroits, New York City. Look at what we are doing right here. When do we decide it's time to unite and stop separating ourselves, making us right and you wrong? And if you don't jump on board and believe what I believe, then you'll always be wrong. When do we accept, okay, I don't believe that, but if you believe that, that's fine. And we can move on. All right. So, Arlene, it's time for our closing remarks. What do you have, dear?
I am just pretty much going to reiterate what I said before, which is, you know, when, you know, religion in and of itself will have some flaws in it simply because it is man's explanation of the divine. And because it is man's explanation of the divine, and because man can be flawed, and may have a skewed perception, be mindful of that when you are reading whatever your religious text is, or any religious text for that matter, that it's man's interpretation of the divine, that the truth of who you are and where you come from is all within you. Go within and connect with your own internal source instead of having somebody else's definition of what the divine is supposed to be. You know, develop your own relationship, develop your own oneness with the source of creation.
Okay.
And you will, let's just say, you go ahead and you put that into practice, and you will find that the illusion, much of the illusion that you were brought up in, begins to fade away. And that is my 2 cents.
And that is your 2 cents. Arlene, thank you for your 2 cents. I'm going to add just 3 cents to it so that we have a whole nickel here. Maybe we can get some bubble gum. I'll split it with you. I just want to say this, and it's really just adding on to what Arlene said. Find your truth within yourself. Stand tall and believe in you. And listen. Listen for the God within you. Because we are all connected to God. We're all connected to each other. There's only one of us here. There's only one of us. And that one of us is God experiencing itself as 7 billion people on the planet Earth. All right. That's all I've got. That has been our show. And as always, in closing, what you become is up to you. Now, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but if it's the game of life you want to win, you must take time to go within. Arlene.
Yes. Merry Christmas to those, or you know what? Happy holidays to whatever. Happy holidays to you. Have a happy New Year. Yes. And, go forth, be joyful, be prosperous, be blessed. You are blessed.
Are you trying to say live long and prosper?
Live long and prosper, yes. Let's go back to Star Trek, yes. Live long and prosper.
Well, I really want to say this. I miss the days of just being able to tell people Merry Christmas. In today's world, it's not politically correct, and you offend people. But I just miss being able to simply say, Merry Christmas. So, tonight, I am going to say, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Good night.
Good night.